Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Tanya Sousa. She's been on the show before, but she hasn't been on for a while, so we're going to find out what she has been up to. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you, Scott?
Oh, I am doing fine. Yeah, so how many books are you up to now?
Oh, I don't know how many books. I probably have, I think, 12 Chicken Soup for the Soul books that I have stories in. And I have 4 children's books and 2 novels. And I think that's it for books.
Right. Do you ever write a book? When you're writing a book, by the time you get done, do you ever say, I will never do this again? I would rather have my fingernails pulled out by pliers. Do you ever get to that point?
Not with my children's books, because right. It's a whole different process. Right. I love them, and they're shorter. Not with my essays or my true life stories or short stories, right. Because, again, they're short. The novel, definitely novels, I have a harder time. I've been working on the same novel, second novel, a prequel to The Starling God for years now, and I just can't seem to finish it because it's more like what you're describing.
Like, for example, with me, I love doing what I do. I love writing, but there's a lot of people who don't write don't understand what we do. They just think, you're just sitting there, you're writing, and that isn't quite the only way. The only thing that happens, like, I can't remember. Howard Mosier once told me how many times he wrote and rewrote
mm-hmm.
his novels, and I don't do it as many times as he did, and he also did it by pencil.
Yes.
And so, which probably took even longer with me. If I did it by pencil, I wouldn't even be able to read what I had written. So, which one do you have a favorite work?
Oh, well, they're all my kids, so I don't know if I could say one's a favorite, but The Starling God still is a big deal, because it was a novel. It was something that encompassed all of, which I didn't bring today because it isn't a new one, but it encompasses so much of my being, so much of my beliefs and philosophies, and it's still selling, so that's kind of neat.
All right, from some people might look at starlings as not very attractive birds.
Oh no, they're beautiful.
Oh really?
Yeah.
And but what made the Starling God so
special?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I learned as I wrote it, and I wondered a lot. I was just giving a presentation at the Goodrich Library the other day, and I was telling kids that wonderment is a big part of inspiration for writing, for me anyway, and wondering about things. And that book brought me from looking out my window at birds in the trees and wondering what they were doing and wondering what they were thinking and saying, to writing a story and discovering things along the way that I had no idea I was going to discover as I wrote. I had a general framework for the book that I knew I wanted to get from point A to point B, but I didn't know how much I was going to actually learn about the world and about what I really thought. So it was very eye-opening. And then another thing I love about it so much is that on Amazon, the reviews of the readers, and I feel like I'm bragging when I say this, so it feels a little weird, but people have just said this was life-changing. This has changed the way I look at life. This has changed the way I look at animals or birds. This has made me think twice. It's changed people's way of thinking. And that is, what more could a writer want? To have somebody question, think, and maybe reevaluate how they look at the world. That's pretty.
Was that your first book?
That was my first book was actually a how-to called Can Dogs Read?
Right.
So that was my first novel, though, my first long work of fiction.
Right. Our works as writers is vastly different. I do history and I interview people, yet on the other hand, what you just explained, why you love doing what you do, is the exact same reason as I do. You know, you start out, you have a point, you know where you want to begin, and you know where you kind of want to end. But it's all the wonderful things that you start out thinking you might know what you're doing, but then you realize through the process
Right.
how much you knew, but then also how much you didn't know.
Exactly.
And it's just a learning experience.
Right.
Yeah, so you were just at the Goodrich, and how did that seem after? Because you've probably been on COVID vacation from
Yes.
public speaking for a couple of years.
Oh, it's
haven't
been
you?
difficult, even selling books. I mean, books sell online, but really wherever they sell the best is when you're, yeah, I'm sure you know, when you're in public and you have things that people can look at, hear about you, have you do a reading or something like that. So I was nervous actually of all the readings I've done and presentations I've done and being a teacher and a guidance counselor. And I stood there at first getting ready, and I was nervous. I had butterflies, but once I got started, it was good. It was wonderful. It was very enriching.
You know, I think it's important to have that bit of nervousness, because I think about the times that I didn't feel nervous, and those are the times that I sometimes walked away thinking I dropped the ball. And I'm going to tell you point blank is, for the first 2 minutes of almost any talk, it might look like I am totally with it, but I almost feel like throwing up on my feet.
Oh no!
And for the first 2 minutes, but then once I get into the flow of it, and once you can get some laughter,
Right.
or reminiscent, I say, okay, I'm cool with this.
Right.
And but I think you like this public element of it more than I do, because I notice you pop up every place, and you know, you like sitting
Like
up.
a weed.
And me, you know, I just I don't know if I'll return to the circuit of speaking again. I'm just not certain. As you know, I've got a lot going on in life, and personally and business wise. So I don't know. I'm enjoying the time off.
Right. Well, I wouldn't decide now. Might be my advice. Not that you asked for it, but don't decide now if you will or not. Just enjoy your time off and see how you feel down the road. But
no, you're really good at getting out there, and you seem to do so effortless.
Ugh.
And that's all
an act.
appearance.
It's all appearance. Yeah. It's all appearance.
So what's your latest book?
My latest book is a children's book called Tossing Stars, and we have the poster down there too. But Tossing Stars is a children's picture book that is illustrated by the same illustrator who worked on my other children's book, Life is a Bowl of Cherry Pits. That book was a Silver Moonbeam Book Award winner. And Katie Flindell is the illustrator's name, and she and I worked together on this. And actually the story, can I tell you the story of how when you talk about what inspires different books or different stories in general, this book, if you look at the cover, there's a boy and he's tossing stars from something up in the air. So there's a larger painting of this, which is also inside the book. I first saw Katie's painting, this very painting, not in my book, but on her website, and it was called Tossing Stars, and it has the little boy sitting on his dad's shoulders, and he's tossing stars from a bucket, and it was the warmest, most joyful, whimsical thing I'd ever seen. I just fell in love with it, and the name Tossing Stars. And Katie uses a lot of stars in all her paintings, and 9/10 of them, I'd say.
So was that how you met her?
No, I met her through Life is a Bowl of Cherry Pits when
Okay.
she illustrated that. But and then we did some signings together and stuff like that. But when I saw that particular painting, I thought I need to do another book with her, and I need to use that painting, as that's the cover. I can see the cover. So I wrote the book around her artwork and around her, inspired by this one painting.
Right.
So
I guess, so how do you get your stories? Just where do they arise from?
they arise from all over the place. This one was from artwork.
Right.
There's one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books that I had published a story in some years ago. There's they're all true stories. If people don't know the Chicken Soup for the Soul
Right.
stories, that's what they are. So I called one the dinosaur wallpaper, and I talked about that at the Goodrich Library too. In fact, I brought the dinosaur wallpaper. It was based on a piece of art that my sister had done, a huge mural on the back of a piece of wallpaper in charcoal and a little bit of pastel for red highlights. And it was a whole big long dinosaur scene. And it inspired me to both draw when I was a child and to write about it. So sometimes other people's creativity is my inspiration. Sometimes it's a joyful moment or a funny moment, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes writing can come from pain. So I write a little bit from everywhere, but this Chicken Soup for the Soul book, Navigating Elder Care and Dementia, was one that came out during the COVID time.
Right. Because you were a caregiver.
Because I was a caregiver, one of the caregivers for my my mother-in-law, and she had had a stroke and suffered with some dementia from that and some difficulties from that. So it was wonderful in some ways to take care of somebody like that. I'd taken care of my mom too when she was dying many, many years ago. And there's also a lot of pain and stress and so forth. But the particular story that made it in here was about a moment of joy, of trying to figure out how to make it a little bit better. So the story in it is called Culinary Travels, and what we had done is we were on COVID, shut down. We couldn't go anywhere. She was a hugely social person. Her language had shut down quite a bit because of the stroke and was very frustrating to her. And we decided we need to give her some inspiration, some traveling, and some joy without traveling. How do we do that? So we started making meals of all these different cultures and putting on music and clothing. And like if we had Mexican food, we had Mexican music on, and we had her wear a Mexican hat, and we'd wear colorful clothes, and so we started taking trips through dinner time.
Right.
So that's just one example. Lots, anywhere. Where do you get yours? I mean, history. I know.
I think we both started our writing largely in the newspaper world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I started at the Chronicle, and I realized, I love people. I love hearing their stories, especially stories of ordinary people, because ordinary people have often done extraordinary things.
Right.
And I just love meeting people. And sometimes people will just tell me something tiny, and they think it's insignificant. I'll say,
Right.
wait, what did you just say?
Yeah.
And then run with that. And but it's interesting. Some people say, yeah, but where do you find things? Where do you find things to write about? And I just say, well, where do you not?
Right.
I can find something. I could find many things right in this room, studio here, that I could write about.
Right.
And it's everywhere. So I think I think we've talked about this before. You were a writer from long ago, from high school.
Right.
I guess my one gift is I'm a Vermonter, and a rural Vermonter, and rural Vermonters, especially foresters, and I'm not a forester, but they could tell some of the best stories. People who spend a lot of times in the woods, they could, I don't know, I guess maybe hallucinations, I don't know. But I did have that gift, and I had and then after working at the Chronicle, particularly with my editorial goddess, Tina Starr. Tina Starr didn't only edit my work, she educated me.
Yes.
And one thing led to another, and I credit my years at the Chronicle. If I had to take away from my memory banks 5 years of college versus my years at the Chronicle, I'd have to keep the years at the Chronicle because those were much more consequential in my life.
Right. Right. I worked for the Newport Daily, so
Right.
we were on the other side of the tracks from each other. But but definitely I found the same thing. You learn a lot as a reporter about human beings, and when you attend, even the things like the meetings, did you have to attend the?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, they could be kind of dry.
Right.
But there were all these little things that happened that were going on behind the scenes and things you notice, and if you observe, you can pick up on a lot. So I think that really does help. If anybody is looking for a way to break into some writing, working as a journalist is not such a far cry from leading you to fiction.
And the other thing I found is, you know, and especially small Vermont, if you want to even talk to the governor. Now, in New York, that may have not been the case, but you know, you can get on the phone. Hey, you know, it might take you a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
I need to, you know, I want to talk to the governor about a particular topic. You could probably get a chance to talk to the governor in the state of Vermont. And I found that being a newspaper reporter, that most people actually want to talk to you. Most people actually want to tell their stories.
Right.
But on the flip side, from my years as in the journalism world, I've probably become one of the most jaded people due to the modern media. But that could be a different story altogether. So at what point did you realize you wanted to write books?
I wrote my first. You asked me a question earlier. You said, when did you write your first book?
Right.
When I published my first book is what my answer was.
Right.
The first book I wrote was in high school. So I wrote the first draft of a book for teenagers in high school, and then I finished it in college, and it was actually my thesis project because I had a writing degree in Johnson State College.
Right.
And so that was my first book. And I knew pretty early on I wanted to write. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a Lois Lane and be a journalist,
Right.
but I was always a storyteller, and my dad was a storyteller. Dad would.
He even published a book before his passing.
He did, yeah. We worked on that together. He had a draft, and I worked it up for him because it needed some work, because he wasn't a writer
Right.
by trade, but that's okay. And then we came out with that together with the same publisher that came out with The Starling God.
Right.
So.
So what's in the future?
In the future, I have one nice thing about COVID, because you and I like to we like to make lemonade out of lemons.
Oh, yeah.
But one nice thing about COVID is I had a lot of time at home. I had time to pull out some children's picture books that I really liked, that I just hadn't quite been able to sell yet, and I wasn't sure why they weren't selling. And I've worked on them and tweaked them and let them sit and then pulled them out again. And I've got a couple of them right where I think they're ready to go. So I've got more books that I'm going to be sending out. And then I am working with my sweetheart to turn our home into an Airbnb, which everybody seems to be doing. But our difference might be that we are going to try to have some package deals, so that if people want to come and stay and, for example, have writing workshops. I've done writing workshops before, but why not in my own place? And have people stay, and they could stay for the long weekend, and we could really delve into how you write, how do you find stories, where you find inspiration from, how you start to write, where you can start getting published, this kind of thing.
So it's going to be a writer's themed Airbnb?
The Airbnb is going to have a lot of themes. There's people could just come and stay and not worry about the theme.
Right.
But I have a dragon in my dining room. This is something not many people know about me. Well, or maybe they do if they're on Facebook with me. But I have a giant metal dragon that's in the garden in the summer and in the dining room in the winter. And the dining room kind of has a mild, it's not over the top, but a medieval theme. And and then we have a music room where there's a grand piano in there, and people and instruments, and people who stay could certainly play the piano if they'd like, or go in there. And then I have a suite I'm working on upstairs, a private suite that I'm calling the Moroccan suite. So it's got Moroccan colors and things like that. And so you might just come and stay and indulge in some. To me, fantasy is really important, and whimsy is really important. So that will be a theme. But the writing is just one piece. My sweetheart might, he's a blacksmith. He might do some blacksmith workshops or demonstrations. There's all sorts of things that we're interested in offering.
You know what I want to see in one of your books?
What do you want to see?
I want to see that kitten. The your little.
Oh, yeah.
You're straight. Now tell how you
Oh.
came about this kitten.
Yeah, that was funny. That was really strange. And I am writing about it actually for one of the next Chicken Soup for the Soul
Okay.
cat book. I don't know if it will get accepted, but I'm writing a story about it. The kitten was, well, I didn't know there was a kitten. We let the dogs out early in the morning.
Right.
And, they went out as always and barked, and they were early. And I called them in like I would normally for breakfast, and our collie would not come in. She sat right there and she wouldn't listen, and she is a stomach on legs, so I didn't know what was going on. So I called to Courtney and I said, hey, Nova isn't coming in, and can you get her? So he went out. She wouldn't come to him either. So he went out and checked to see what was the matter, and he came back and he said, there's a baby. And I said, a baby? And I'm picturing a human baby. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, there's a baby. I don't know what it is, but there's a baby out there. So I went out too. I'm in my jams, and he's in his jams, and we're sitting out in the freezing cold. It was in the early spring, and it was still, or early fall, excuse me. It was very cold. And in the frosted grass is this little black creature with his eyes closed and his ears flat against his head. And I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't know if it was a skunk or what it was. So I picked it up, and on further inspection, it was a newborn kitten.
Yeah.
How it got in the dog yard, we don't know. We're assuming maybe the mother was transporting it and had dropped it when the dogs were let out. We don't know. But it was very cold, and it was pretty close to death. So the Frontier Animal Society ended up taking it for us and putting it with a foster mom. And we told them that, we'll happily pay the fee to adopt the kitten when it's ready, but we think it will have a better chance with a cat mother. Mm. So when the time came, we did adopt him, and his name is Sirius. Mm. And Sirius is both like Sirius Black, because he's a black sort of medium hair kitten. And he is also, that's the dog star. And since he was saved, the only reason he lived at all was because the dog found him. Hmm. We would have never known he was out there until it was too late. So.
Does he have a lot of character?
Oh my gosh, he is. I mean, he's a kitten. He's wild and woolly, and he's just. I don't even know how to describe him. Right. He's just wonderful.
I don't know if you mind me telling this story, and
but you're going to anyway.
I'm going to tell this story. Is the one thing is, well, we have a lot of connections. You graduated with my wife from school.
Yeah.
We both write, but when I could tell you are madly. You and Courtney are meant for each other.
I would agree.
I can't think, but it was through. I won't say I was the matchmaker, but my journal was a conduit. You came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to write a story on this guy. He's a blacksmith, and well, I'm not certain whether you're interested in the story or if you're interested in love."
Well, maybe both.
Maybe, and so after you did the story on him, one thing led to another. And now you are longtime partners.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when I see you guys, I think, because I look at you two and I just think, I think the two of you were meant to be.
Yes, I think so too. And it's kind of funny because I knew him through his mother, who I ended up caretaking for later. But, I knew him from a distance, but never, he was very, shy isn't quite the right word. He would say he's not shy. But he just didn't really interact when I would be there for the Wooden Horse Arts Guild meetings or whatever. Right. He didn't really interact. But there was something that captivated me about him. So that was a way to get to know him a little better, because I did have a feeling too. I had a feeling. And because of that interview, we had the chance to talk. Right. And, without anything else in the middle. And you're right, it was instant, and we both sort of knew, and that was that. Right. And he's very supportive of my writing, and we write some things together too, which is kind of fun. Right. But they're not anything they're they're a little edgier than they're funny, but they're a little edgier than what I do.
All right, we only have a few more minutes left. What more would you like to tell the listeners and the viewers?
So I'm going to put in a little plug. Tossing Stars is available on Amazon,
Right.
and signed copies are available through me. People can email me at tanyasusa@yahoo.com if they would like, and I could get a copy to them. But I would also like to say that anybody could be an author who enjoys writing and who has a life, like you said. They have more to talk about than they realize they have. And the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, I like to encourage people who think they might want to write to pick up a copy of. It doesn't have to be one with my story in it, but pick up a copy, read through, learn a little bit about what they do, and look at their website. They call out for different topics all the time, and there's no reason that you couldn't write an important story about your life and have it published. So, and sometimes I do workshops to offer tips, or sometimes I just give some quick free advice to people.
Now you talk about giving advice. Are you like me, where you're constantly learning yourself though? Like,
I know everything.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know that?
No.
Kidding.
You
No.
must learn along the way.
Of course I do. That's what life is.
I sometimes look back at some of my work, and I have two thoughts. Some of them I was like, what was I thinking? The other one was, I have to look, because I've written so much. Sometimes I have to look to make sure that, did I write that?
I know.
Boy, you were very lucid that day. And because, sometimes it's like, wow, I actually did that. Of
Right.
course, I don't know about you, but I have an editor, Janine Young of Glover, and editors are probably some of the most unsung heroes, whether in the newspaper world, the book world, because I'm not perfect with
You're not?
grammar.
No.
No.
Ugh.
And I don't know what dangling participles are and everything, but Janine is able to edit my work in such a way where she edits it without taking my voice away, because mine is unique. I'm a Vermonter. I sound like a Vermonter. I write like a Vermonter, and she understands it. Besides that, is I write a fair amount about farming and kind of stuff. I've never farmed, but she's a farmer from way back, so she's able. Do you have an editor?
The publishers have their own editors, but when I had Radiant Hen and I published books for other people, Janine was my editor as well, actually, and she's wonderful. And I don't have any say in this. They don't do much editing. I try to do a lot of self-editing, and I'm actually doing an editing project right now for another author, but I'm a newbie. I'm not that good at it.
One last question I'd like to ask you: how has the way people read books affected children's books? Like, a lot of people now, they read their books on Kindle, but I think your books really are books that people want to hold, aren't they? Especially kids.
Right. Well, I mean, like, Tossing Stars is available on ebook, on Kindle, but you're right. I have no idea. The publisher, I won't know for another quarter if anything is sold.
Right. All right. Well, it was great having you on. We'll have to have you on sooner again next time, because I think it's been a while since.
It's been a couple of years at least,
yeah,
I think.
and I don't
more.
think you've been on since COVID. So let's hope the next time you come on that COVID isn't even in our vocabulary, except for writing about it in the past tense.
Sounds good.
So, okay, well, thanks for coming on, and you always do great work, and I look forward to you next time. You got another book coming out?
Hopefully. We'll see.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. You too. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.